Neka Agwamike's blunt declaration that talks have been not constructive landed hard, especially with fewer than 100 days before the season is set to begin. But her urgency is undercut by Breanna Stewart's contradictory optimism, leaving the union's stance muddled and its leadership fractured. Without a unified front, the players are fighting a two-front battle, negotiating with billionaires while managing visible internal.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
The clock is ticking, and the owners haven't budged. No full bargaining sessions this year. No counteroffer to the proposal from over a month ago. That silence isn't neglect, it's strategy. In this void, power consolidates. Players need the season to earn. Owners can afford to wait. And with college stars and international talent waiting in the wings, the threat of replacement looms large. The impasse now hinges less on compromise and more on calculation. Who breaks first? And who can afford to hold the line when every day brings the season closer to collapse? Despite the clickbait chaos of that headline, the season isn't officially canceled. Not yet, but the storm clouds are very real. With fewer than 100 days until the WNBA's highly anticipated 30th season, the league is staring down the barrel of a full-blown labor meltdown. The problem? Money, power, philosophy, and a stalemate that's starting to look more like a countdown. Let's start with the demand that lit the fuse. The WNBA Players Union is pushing for a 30% share of gross revenue. Not net, not profit, gross. That's revenue before arena leases, travel costs, marketing, production, staffing, or any of the massive operating expenses that come with running a pro league. It's a line in the sand that rewrites how the league does business. Essentially, the players want to be treated like equity stakeholders in the brand, not just employees collecting a check. Meanwhile, the league is offering 70% of net revenue, meaning money that's left over after all those costs are handled. On paper, 70% sounds generous. In practice, it's a whole different economic reality. And that philosophical rift is exactly why the two sides can't find common ground. It's not just about paychecks. It's about control. Now zoom in on the league's December 2024 proposal. A base max salary of $1 million, rising to $1.3 million with incentives. That would average out to about $530,000 per player, more than 4 times what players were making before. But it still falls short of the union's goal, which is over $800,000 in average salary and a $10.5 million salary cap. On top of that, the players want rookie contracts shortened, the core player designation eliminated, guaranteed mental health funding, and year-round housing support for every player, including the ones pulling in over $1.5 million a year. The housing issue alone has turned into a symbol of the larger fight. The league stance? Cover housing for lower-paid players making $70,000 to $80,000, but expect the max contract stars to handle their own rent. The union? They want everyone covered. Not because the top-tier players can't afford luxury apartments, but because housing has become a marker of respect, a stand-in for something deeper. Who's valued? Who's seen? Who's considered essential to the league's image? It's a bold ask. And while the players see it as a claim to dignity and equality, the league sees it as a budget strain wrapped in symbolism. But here's where the breakdown gets even messier. The union isn't speaking with one voice. Neka Agwamike, the WNBA president, called the negotiations not constructive and expressed frustration over the league's silence since the union submitted its proposal more than a month ago. Meanwhile, Union Vice President Breanna Stewart said she was starting to see the end of the tunnel. That split in messaging has serious consequences. It signals internal friction. It chips away at the union's credibility. And for a league that's already slow-playing negotiations, it's an excuse to keep dragging its feet. Because time, right now, is the league's biggest weapon. The league hasn't offered a formal response to the union's proposal. No counteroffer. No bargaining sessions. Nothing. That's not an oversight. That's strategy. Tactical silence. The kind of silence that makes you sweat. And it's not random. Owners know that most players can't afford to miss a season. They know this isn't the NBA, where top contracts hit 8 figures and players can coast through a lockout. For most WNBA athletes, that league check isn't optional, it's survival. And that's where the asymmetry of power really shows itself. Owners, especially the NBA billionaires bankrolling much of the WNBA, have been operating at a loss for decades. They've subsidized the league without profit for 30 years. So while 2024 brought record-breaking ratings, sellout crowds, and a huge spike in public attention, that surge was largely credited to one name, Caitlyn Clark. A rookie, a phenomenon, the face of the future, but also a wild card. Because even with all that excitement, owners aren't rushing to tie the league's future to 1 year of success. They're cautious, skeptical, and they're not ready to commit to a revamped financial structure based on what could be a fleeting moment. That's why the union's push for long-term, contractual changes feels premature to them. They're not ready to treat 2024 as the new normal, especially if that normal hinges on a single breakout star. This is where the power dynamic flips. Because while the players are demanding historical redress and long-awaited recognition, the league is focused on sustainability. They want measured growth, not symbolic victories. And that difference in priorities is why this standoff is escalating, not resolving. And there's an even colder threat simmering underneath all of this: replacement players. The league hasn't said it outright, but the implication is there. If veteran players won't play, there's a crop of college stars and international talent ready to step in. Players who would jump at the opportunity for national exposure and a six-figure paycheck. Especially with someone like Caitlyn Clark anchoring the spotlight. The league could move on. The players can't. That's the asymmetry. That's the pressure point. And that's why silence from League HQ isn't just stalling. It's a calculated tactic. The union, for all its ambition, is up against structural power. The owners have the money. They control the schedule. They own the platform. And with union leadership sending mixed messages, it's even easier for the league to stay on the offensive by doing absolutely nothing. Even the players' view of a $1 million salary reveals how far apart the two sides are. To the union, it's a decimal, barely worth mentioning. To the league, it's a leap, a massive increase from previous compensation norms. But that perception gap shows how high the stakes have become. This isn't just about money. It's about how that money means something different to both sides. The Clark effect complicates things further. She's not part of the negotiations, but her influence is undeniable. She's the reason ratings soared, the reason merch flew off shelves, the reason people who never watched a WNBA game suddenly tuned in. But that spotlight cuts both ways, because now the league sees her, and players like her, as the future, and that reshapes everything about how talent is valued. Veteran players are asking to be rewarded for building the league. But the league is thinking ahead to the next Caitlyn Clark, to the next era, and whether that value should go to those who created the league or those who can elevate it. And that raises a tough question. If the current stars are no longer the economic engine, how much leverage do they really have? Right now, it's not about who's right. It's about who has the leverage to hold out. And so far, the league is playing the long game. Confident, silent, patient. What happens next? Either a last-minute deal pulls the league back from the edge, or the season opens with empty courts and the bitter taste of missed opportunity. Because make no mistake, if this season slips away, the damage will be lasting. Not just to the players, not just to the league's finances, but to its momentum, its credibility, its future. So where do you stand? Is the union asking for progress? Or asking too much, too soon? Is the league being responsible? Or just stonewalling until desperation kicks in? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if you think the players deserve more. Share this with someone who's been following the drama. And subscribe, because if the season implodes, this saga is far from over. And here's the part that stings the most. This was supposed to be the season, the 30th anniversary, the turning point, the breakout moment that decades of sweat, sacrifice, and side hustles were building toward. After years of playing in half-empty arenas, watching NBA coverage swallow up sports networks, and fighting just to get a full season highlight reel on national TV, the WNBA finally had the momentum. Ratings spiked. Ticket sales surged. Sponsors started actually calling them. For once, the question wasn't, why should I care about the WNBA? It was, how can I get in now before it explodes? And then this. Instead of celebrating growth, the league and its players are locked in a standoff over revenue math and philosophical identity. And the wildest part? Everyone involved knows this is the moment they've all been working toward. They just fundamentally disagree on what to do with it. For the players' union, it's about long overdue recognition. Not just a raise, but a reckoning. The argument is simple. If the league is finally thriving, if the players are driving headlines and growing the brand, then they should be sharing in that upside now. Not 10 years from now. Not when ownership decides it's safe. Now, while the public is paying attention. But for the league, it's not that simple. They don't see this season as a payoff. They see it as a test run, a trial to see if the spike in viewership and revenue has staying power. To them, locking in major financial commitments based on one explosive year, however exciting, is not strategy. It's a gamble, and they're not willing to risk the league's stability on it. And this is where the impasse becomes more than just about numbers. It becomes about trust. Players don't trust the league to ever feel ready to make big moves. Owners don't trust the current momentum enough to hand over equity-style revenue shares. And both sides are looking across the table, waiting for someone to blink. But the longer this goes on, the more likely it is that neither side wins. Because while they argue about gross versus net revenue, and while housing support for millionaires becomes a headline, what's slipping through the cracks is the entire season. The actual product. The thing fans were finally rallying around. It's being used as leverage, held hostage by two groups who care deeply, but can't agree on how to express that care. And let's be real, the union's position, while passionate, is running out of time. The owners can wait. They've waited before. They've poured millions into the league for decades without asking for profit. They can afford to stall. But the players? They can't. Most WNBA athletes are not rolling in endorsement money. Overseas gigs are inconsistent. And without those league checks, financial stress becomes very real, very fast. That's exactly why the league is staying quiet. No public statements. No counteroffers. No bargaining tables. Just the quiet ticking of a clock that everyone knows is working in one direction. Every day without a deal is a day closer to players blinking first. It's not just about who's right. It's about who can afford to be wrong longer. And the silent threat that looms over all of this? Replacement players. The league hasn't said the words out loud, but they don't need to. Everyone knows what's sitting on the table, even if it's not in the press release. There are college stars graduating, international players hungry for exposure, and a media ecosystem now paying real attention to women's basketball. The opportunity? It's there. If veterans won't play, the league might just move forward without them. That's a brutal possibility, but it's not a bluff. Because as much as the league respects its legacy stars, they know that the audience right now isn't just there for tradition. It's there for novelty, for new faces, for breakout performances and buzzy rookies. Caitlyn Clark didn't become a national name by slowly climbing the ranks. She arrived with fireworks. And that kind of visibility is currency the league hasn't had before. So yes, the union helped build this platform. But the league is calculating who's best equipped to capitalize on it. And that calculation? It doesn't always favor the veterans. It's a cold, corporate way to look at sports. But that's the reality behind every labor negotiation. The math doesn't care how long you've been here. It only cares how much you're worth right now. That's why this moment feels so fragile. Because if both sides let this thing collapse, if there's no agreement, no games, no season, the damage isn't just temporary. It's existential. Fans who just got on board won't stick around through a labor war. Sponsors won't keep throwing money into a PR disaster. And the media, as always, will move on. Because nothing kills momentum faster than silence. And here's the thing neither side wants to admit. This should have been solved months ago. The union submitted their proposal over 4 weeks ago. The league has not responded. Not even a counter. No formal bargaining sessions have taken place this year. That's not negotiation, it's stonewalling. Strategic, yes, but it's also disrespectful. It sends a message. We're not in a hurry, and we don't think you are either. That's a dangerous game, because players are not machines. They have families, expenses, mental health needs. And this standoff, dragging on with zero progress, is eroding trust not just between players and management, but within the union itself. Look at the split between Mike and Stewart. When the president says talks are going nowhere, and the VP says things are looking up, that's not optimism. That's misalignment. And in a fight this serious, any crack in the foundation is a green light for the league to stall even longer. And you better believe they're watching that closely. Because if the union can't maintain a unified front, the league doesn't need to fight. It just needs to wait. Let the pressure mount. Let the financial stress kick in. Let doubt take hold. And then, maybe, the union comes back to the table with a softer ask. With less ambition. With more urgency. That's the playbook. It's not new. It's just brutal. And the question now is, will the players fold, or will the league miscalculate and stall their own momentum into oblivion? Because while owners believe in slow growth and sustainability, the truth is sometimes momentum doesn't come back. Sometimes you miss your window. Sometimes the world moves on. If this season gets canceled or even delayed, it sends one very clear message. The WNBA is not ready for its moment. And whether that's fair or not doesn't matter. That's how it'll be perceived. This isn't just another contract dispute. This is the league's coming-of-age moment. And how it's handled will define the next decade. And here's the cruel irony at the heart of it all. This was supposed to be the year when the WNBA finally stopped fighting for visibility and started focusing on legacy. When a conversation could shift from support women's sports to look how far they've come. Instead, we're back in the trenches, watching an all-out collision between ambition and austerity play out in real time. It's a standoff that's not just about money. It's about who gets to define success. For the union, it's measured in dignity, in respect, in finally being treated as equal stakeholders in the game they've built with sweat equity. For the league, success means staying alive. Not just this season, but for the next 5, 10, 20 years. It's not just survival mode. It's legacy control. And nothing encapsulates that tension more than the revenue fight. On the surface, 30% of gross revenue sounds like a clean, ambitious demand. But it shifts all the risk to the people who sign the checks. That's why owners are pushing for net revenue-based compensation, because net revenue takes into account how much it actually costs to run the league. Everything from arena rentals to charter flights to marketing budgets. If you hand over gross revenue without sharing in the expenses, the owners are left holding the financial bag no matter what happens. And let's not ignore the context. These owners have been subsidizing the WNBA for 3 decades. Not 1 year, not 5, 30. Most leagues would have folded under that level of long-term unprofitability. The only reason the WNBA is still here is because of NBA ownership support, slow building institutional investment, and a whole lot of patience. So when players demand equity-level revenue without equity-level responsibility, it feels, at least to the owners, like a disconnect from reality. But for the players, it's not just about math. It's about symbolism. It's about control. It's about not having to justify why they deserve more, especially now, in a year where the league finally caught fire. And that brings us right back to Caitlyn Clark, the name on everyone's lips, even though she's not in the room. Her impact on the league has been undeniable. Attendance, ratings, and media coverage exploded the second she was projected to go pro. She hasn't played a single minute in the WNBA yet, but already she's shifted the balance of power. She made people care, and now the league sees her as the anchor of its next era. But that only raises the stakes, because while Clark is driving the hype, the union, led by veteran players, is asking to be compensated based on that level of market interest. They're arguing that their sacrifices laid the groundwork for someone like Caitlyn to thrive. And they're not wrong. But from a league perspective, betting big on the old guard based on the buzz surrounding one rookie, that's a gamble, especially when owners have 30 years of red ink on their balance sheets. It creates a weird kind of intergenerational tension. The current stars want to be paid like the league is already thriving. The league wants to grow conservatively and let Clark's arrival validate the next round of investment. And in the middle of all that, a ticking clock. No deal. No counteroffer. No meetings. We're under 100 days from tip-off and neither side is budging. That's not just risky, it's reckless. Because once the public starts to lose interest, it's almost impossible to get them back. And this is where the league's silence becomes a power move. By refusing to respond to the union's proposal, they're doing more than just delaying negotiations. They're testing the union's unity. They're waiting for fractures, for public missteps, for players to slip up and show that not everyone is on the same page, which already happened. Nneka Agwamike called the negotiations not constructive. Breanna Stewart said she sees the light at the end of the tunnel. That's not message discipline. That's a red flag. And the league noticed. In high-stakes bargaining, especially when the financial future of an entire league is on the line, mixed messaging is a liability. And right now, it's making it easier for the league to justify its radio silence. Because why respond when the other side can't even agree on how they're feeling? And while the union fumbles with public perception, the league is leveraging silence into strength. Every day without a deal is another day closer to players losing their paychecks. And most WNBA players can't afford to miss that income, not without real consequences. That's the harsh truth of this negotiation. The players may have the moral argument, but the league has the leverage, and they're using it, which brings us to the nuclear option, replacement players. It hasn't been officially proposed. No one's put it in writing, but the message is clear. There's a new generation of talent ready and willing. Young, hungry players from overseas and from elite college programs who would take those contracts tomorrow, especially with the media spotlight finally on the league. If the veterans won't play, the league might just move on without them. And honestly, they could. Not because it's fair, not because it's ethical, but because the WNBA's value right now is momentum. And momentum can be transferred. The cameras don't care who's on the court as long as people are watching. That's what makes this such a brutal game of chicken. One side needs a deal. The other side needs a product. So what happens next? Either the union softens its demands, hoping to preserve the season and salvage progress, or the league gambles on rebuilding with a new cast. Either way, something breaks. Something has to give. Because the current stalemate, it's not sustainable. You can't run a league on principles and silence. You need structure. You need trust. And most importantly, you need games. Every day that goes by without movement is a lost opportunity. Sponsors lose interest. Broadcasters move on. Casual fans forget. And the spotlight that was so hard to earn, it turns cold. So here we are, on the edge of what was supposed to be a landmark season, watching a negotiation that looks more like a staring contest. And the worst part? Everyone involved knows what's at stake. They just don't seem willing to blink. If the season is delayed, or worse, canceled, the consequences will ripple, not just through the WNBA, but through women's sports as a whole. Because right now, the WNBA isn't just fighting for itself. It's carrying the banner for every underfunded league, every overlooked athlete, every young girl watching from the stands thinking, maybe I could be next. Let it fall apart now, and that message disappears. So what do you think? Has the union overplayed its hand? Or is the league dragging its feet on progress? Drop your take in the comments and let us know where you stand. Smash that like button if you're hoping this season actually happens. Share this with someone still catching up on the mess. And subscribe because we're following every twist in this saga until the buzzer sounds or the lights go out.